Imagine waking up one morning, the sunlight spilling through your window, warm and golden, but your body feels like it's betraying you. Your hands tremble as you reach for your coffee mug, and a dull ache pulses through your joints, a reminder that something isn't right. You're not old, not even close, but your body is whispering a truth you're not ready to hear. This was me, not so long ago. My name is Lynn, and I was 32 when my life tilted on its axis. I was a graphic designer, always chasing deadlines, sketching late into the night, fueled by caffeine and ambition. Life was a whirlwind of color and chaos, and I loved it. Until the day it all slowed down, not because I wanted it to, but because my body demanded it. It started with fatigue, the kind that clings to you like damp clothes after a rainstorm. I thought it was just stress, too many late nights, too many skipped meals. But then came the pain, sharp and relentless, creeping into my joints like an uninvited guest. Doctor's visits followed, each one a blur of tests and guarded expressions. When the diagnosis finally came, rheumatoid arthritis, it felt like a stranger had walked into my life and rearranged everything. Chronic illness. The words sounded heavy, like they belonged to someone else, someone older, someone whose life was already winding down. But here I was, barely in my 30s, staring at a future I hadn't planned for. I remember sitting in my car after that appointment, the engine off, the world outside moving in slow motion. People were laughing, crossing the street, carrying shopping bags, living their ordinary lives. I envied them. How could they move so freely when I felt anchored to this new reality? I wanted to scream, to demand answers from someone, anyone. Why me? Why now? But the silence in the car was louder than any answer I could have gotten. I drove home that day, my hands gripping the steering wheel, not because I was angry, but because I was afraid. Afraid of what this meant, afraid of losing the person I used to be. The weeks that followed were a haze. I'd wake up, force myself through the motions, shower, eat, work, but every movement felt like wading through mud. My sketchpad, once my sanctuary, sat untouched. I couldn't hold a pencil without wincing. My friends would text, inviting me out, their voices bright and oblivious. Come on, Lynn, you're young. You'll bounce back. But I wasn't bouncing anywhere. I was sinking. The hardest part wasn't the pain in my joints, it was the pain in my heart, the realization that my life, as I knew it, was slipping away. I started avoiding mirrors. Not because I didn't recognize my face, but because I didn't recognize the person behind it. The Lynn who danced at music festivals, who could work 12-hour days and still laugh over drinks with friends, she was fading. In her place was someone new, someone I didn't know how to be. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was it. Was this my life now? A cycle of doctor's appointments, medications, and a body that felt like it was no longer mine? One evening, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker like stars. My neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Thursday, was watering her plants across the way. She waved at me, her smile soft but knowing. "You look like you're carrying the world, child," she called out. I forced a laugh, brushing it off, but her words stuck. Carrying the world. That's exactly what it felt like. I wasn't just dealing with a diagnosis, I was grappling with a new version of myself, one I wasn't sure I could love. That night, something shifted. Not a grand epiphany, not yet, but a quiet question: what if this wasn't the end? What if this was just a different beginning? I didn't have answers, but for the first time, I wanted to find them. I didn't know it then, but that question was the first step toward reclaiming my life, not as it was, but as it could be. The months after my diagnosis were like walking through a fog. Every step felt uncertain, every decision weighed down by doubt. I'd sit in my doctor's office, listening to lists of medications, side effects, and lifestyle changes, nodding like I understood, but inside, I was screaming. This wasn't supposed to be my story. I was supposed to be building a career, traveling the world, maybe falling in love. Instead, I was learning terms like flare-ups and remission, words that felt like they belonged to someone else's life. The pain wasn't just physical. It was the loneliness of it all. Friends tried to understand, but their sympathy often felt like pity, and their suggestions, "Have you tried yoga?" or "Maybe it's stress?" only deepened the gap between us. I stopped going out. I told myself it was because I was tired, but the truth was, I didn't want to explain why I couldn't keep up. I didn't want to be the sick friend. So, I retreated. My apartment became my world, my couch my refuge. I'd scroll through social media, watching other people's lives unfold, weddings, vacations, promotions, and feel like I was falling behind. There were days when I gave up. Not dramatically, not with tears or grand gestures, but quietly. I'd skip my medication because what was the point? I'd cancel therapy appointments because talking about it felt like rubbing salt in a wound. I remember one afternoon, staring at a blank canvas, my pencil scattered across the table. I wanted to draw, to create something, anything, but my hands wouldn't cooperate. I threw a pencil across the room, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. I was tired of fighting a battle I didn't choose. It was around this time that I met Dr. Min, a rheumatologist with a quiet demeanor and eyes that seemed to see right through me. During one appointment, he didn't talk about blood tests or dosages. Instead, he asked, "What do you miss most about your old life?" I was caught off guard. No one had asked me that. I thought for a moment, then said, "I miss feeling free." He nodded, like he'd heard it 1,000 times. "Freedom isn't just in your body," he said. "It's in your mind. You can't control the disease, but you can control how you meet it." His words lingered, but they didn't sink in right away. I was too deep in my own despair, too focused on what I'd lost. Then came the day I hit rock bottom. It was a rainy afternoon, and I'd had a bad flare-up. I couldn't get out of bed, couldn't even hold a glass of water without pain shooting through my wrists. I called my sister, sobbing, something I hadn't done in years. "I can't do this anymore," I told her. "I'm not strong enough." She was quiet for a long time, then said, "You don't have to be strong. You just have to keep going." Something about her words cracked the wall I'd built around myself. I realized I wasn't just fighting a disease, I was fighting myself, my own fear of a life I didn't recognize. That night, I made a decision, not a grand one, but a small one. I'd try. Not to be the old Lynn, but to find out who this new Lynn could be. I started small, a walk around the block, even when it hurt. A sketch, even if it was just a single line. I joined an online support group, hesitant at first, but the stories I found there, people like me, struggling but still living, gave me a flicker of hope. One woman in the group, Sarah, shared how she'd started journaling to process her pain. She didn't sugarcoat it, she talked about the days she wanted to give up, but also the days she found joy in small things, a sunrise, a good book, a laugh with a friend. Her honesty felt like a lifeline. I bought a journal the next day. At first, I wrote about my anger, my fear, my grief. But over time, I started writing about other things, the way the morning light hit my coffee mug, the sound of my neighbor's laughter, the satisfaction of finishing a sketch, even if it took hours. I wasn't fixed. The pain was still there, the fatigue still came in waves. But something was shifting. I was starting to see myself not as a victim of my illness, but as someone who could live alongside it. Dr. Min's words came back to me, freedom was in my mind. I wasn't free of pain, but I could be free of despair. That realization was the first step toward a new kind of life, one I hadn't imagined but was starting to believe in. The journey from despair to hope wasn't a straight line. There were days when I felt like I was moving forward, only to be pulled back by a flare-up or a wave of doubt. But something had changed inside me. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was searching for a way to thrive. It started with small victories, finishing a walk without collapsing, completing a sketch that felt like me again. These moments, tiny as they were, began to stitch together a new version of myself, one that was learning to live with, not against, my illness. I leaned into the support group more, not just reading other stories but sharing my own. It was terrifying at first, admitting my fears to strangers, but their responses, empathic, raw, real, made me feel seen. One day, Sarah, the woman whose journaling had inspired me, invited me to a virtual coffee chat. We talked for hours, not just about our illnesses but about our dreams, our fears, the lives we still wanted to live. She told me about how she'd started teaching art to kids with chronic conditions, using her own pain as a bridge to connect with them. "You don't have to be well to make a difference," she said. "You just have to be you." Her words lit something in me. I'd always thought my illness had stolen my purpose, but what if it could be part of it? I started experimenting. I posted a sketch online, a simple drawing of a woman standing in a storm, her face calm despite the chaos around her. I captioned it, "This is me, learning to stand in the rain." To my surprise, people responded, not just with likes, but with stories. People with their own struggles, their own storms, reached out to say my art made them feel less alone. That was the moment I realized my illness wasn't just a burden, it was a lens. It gave me a way to see the world differently, to connect with others in a way I never had before. I started creating more, not despite my pain but because of it. Each sketch became a conversation, a way to process what I was feeling and to share it with others. My apartment, once a cage, became a studio again. My hands still trembled, but I learned to work with them, to let the imperfections in my lines tell a story of their own. I also started taking better care of myself, not out of obligation but out of curiosity. What could my body do if I listened to it? I worked with a physical therapist who taught me gentle exercises that didn't aggravate my joints. I changed my diet, not drastically, but enough to notice a difference in my energy. I meditated, not to fix myself, but to find quiet in the chaos. These weren't cures, they didn't erase my illness, but they gave me tools to live better within it. One day, I got an email from a local community center. They'd seen my art online and asked if I'd lead a workshop for young adults with chronic illnesses. Me, teach? The idea was daunting. I wasn't a teacher, and I certainly wasn't a role model. But something in me said yes before I could overthink it. The first workshop was small, just 6 people, but it felt like a room full of hope. We didn't just draw, we talked, laughed, cried. One girl, barely 20, said she hadn't picked up a paintbrush since her diagnosis because she thought her creativity was gone. By the end of the session, she was smiling, her canvas covered in bold, messy strokes. That workshop became a turning point. I realized I wasn't just helping others, I was helping myself. Teaching forced me to show up, to be present, to believe in something bigger than my pain. I started hosting more workshops, both online and in person. My art began to take on a life of its own, featured in local galleries, shared on social media, even published in a small magazine. I wasn't the Lynn I used to be, but I was someone new, someone who was living, creating, and connecting in ways I hadn't thought possible. The success wasn't just in the recognition. It was in the moments of joy, laughing with my workshop students, finishing a piece of art that felt true, waking up and feeling, even for a moment, like I was enough. My illness hadn't gone away, but it no longer defined me. It was part of my story, not the whole of it. As I stood in front of a gallery one evening, watching people admire my work, I thought about that day in the car after my diagnosis, when I'd felt so lost. If I could go back, I'd tell that version of myself one thing: this pain is not the end. It's the beginning of a story you haven't written yet. I'd tell her that the life ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be beautiful, not despite the struggle, but because of it. Looking back, I realized that living well with a chronic illness isn't about erasing the pain or pretending it doesn't exist. It's about finding a way to dance with it, to let it be part of the music without letting it drown out the melody. My life today is fuller than I ever imagined it could be. My workshops have grown, reaching people across the country and even beyond. I've met hundreds of others with chronic illnesses, each with their own story, their own strength. Together, we've built a community, not just of shared pain, but of shared hope. I still have bad days. The pain comes in waves, and some mornings, I wake up feeling like I'm starting from scratch. But I've learned to meet those days with grace, to treat my body not as an enemy but as a partner, one that's doing its best. I've learned to celebrate the small victories. A pain-free hour, a finished sketch, a conversation that leaves someone smiling. These moments are my triumphs, my proof that life goes on, not in spite of my illness, but alongside it. One of the greatest gifts this journey has given me is perspective. I used to think strength meant pushing through, ignoring the pain, pretending everything was fine. Now I know strength is in the quiet moments, the choice to get out of bed, to create, to love, even when it's hard. It's in the vulnerability of sharing your story, knowing it might help someone else feel less alone. It's in the courage to redefine what living well means, not as the absence of struggle, but as the presence of meaning. Last month, I stood on a stage at a local health conference, sharing my story with a room full of strangers. I told them about the car, the diagnosis, the despair, and the slow, beautiful climb toward hope. I told them about the people who helped me along the way, Dr. Min, Sarah, my sister, the students in my workshops. I told them about the art, the community, the life I've built. When I finished, a woman in the audience came up to me, tears in her eyes. "I was diagnosed last week," she said. "I thought my life was over. But hearing you, I think I can keep going." That moment was worth every painful day, every sleepless night. It wasn't just about me anymore, it was about her, about all the others who might hear my story and find a spark of hope. As I walked off that stage, I felt a warmth in my chest, a kind of joy I hadn't known was possible. This was my legacy, not just the art, not just the workshops, but the ripple effect of courage, of showing others that pain doesn't have to be the end. If you're watching this, maybe you're carrying your own weight, your own diagnosis, your own storm. I won't tell you it's easy, because it's not. I won't tell you to be strong, because you already are, even if you don't feel it yet. All I'll say is this. There's a life waiting for you on the other side of this pain, not the one you planned, but one that's yours. It's in the small moments, the quiet victories, the people you'll meet along the way. It's in the art you create, the stories you share, the love you give. As I sit here now, sketching under the morning light, I think about the road I've traveled. It wasn't the one I chose, but it's the one that led me here, to a life that's not perfect, but is mine, wholly and beautifully mine. And maybe, just maybe, it's leading you somewhere too. If this story